Well, you've moved around a fair bit in your career with the Forest Service, haven't you?
Yeah. Started out at Fernie. I wrote the assistant ranger exam in Castle.
But where were you born?
Castle.
In Castle.
Yeah. And I've been working in the Mammoth Mine in Silverton, living at Appledale. They closed down. Then I heard that Forest Service was writing exams for new recruits. So I thought, hell, I'll go to Castle and try it. Out of that, I got a assistant ranger job and went to Fernie.
Huh.
And that was in 40 years. I don't know, must be spring of 41. So I stayed with them after that.
Mm-hmm.
They moved me around back down to Nelson, and then they gave me a ranger job in Arrow Lakes. Was up there for a while.
Was that at Arrowhead? Or?
Yeah. Then they moved me to Cranbrook, in charge of that district. That was back in 46. So I went in as a ranger, you know, without too much experience in the Forest Service, but we learned fast and hard. Got away with it most of the time. Well, then they wanted an inspector on buildings in a station in Nelson, so they transferred me and promoted me out of Cranbrook into Nelson. I got on there as an inspector of the new buildings. You see, in the early 50s there, they were expanding, building ranger stations around the country, and they needed somebody with some knowledge of blueprints to inspect the work and check up on it, keep it going. So I had that job for quite a few years.
Why had you the experience? Was that from your mind working?
Previous life outside before I joined the Forest Service.
Mm-hmm. Had you been a builder?
No, but I had a pretty general all-around knowledge. I could read blueprints, which was a handy thing to know, and that was something that most of them couldn't do. So that went on for a while till they finished building. And they wanted supervisors of rangers around the district, so I got one of those jobs. And that carried me through till I finally pulled the pin.
Which part of the district did you supervise?
East Kootenays. Mm-hmm. That's from Golden to Fernie, Cranbrook. But most of the rangers at that time, hell, they were just as smart as I was, and they knew as much as I did, and the supervision was just a matter of helping them out in the tight spots and so on. It wasn't too rough a job. In fact, it got damn monotonous at times. That was one reason I was getting a little tired of it when I pulled my superannuation a few years earlier.
Before you were 65?
Yeah.
How old were you when you retired?
I put my application in, I was 60. And my financial situation was satisfactory, so I just pulled out. And it seemed funny at that time. I had a 25-year pin coming from the Forest Service, and it was a little overdue. And went on for a while. And they decided to have a party at Victoria. There was half a dozen other fellows due for the 25-year pin. We're going to give them all a trip to Victoria and back. So they all got their expenses paid, but Christie, he quit, so he don't get his expenses, though he's welcome to come. So I told him to go to hell. And they figured that I didn't warrant the expenses of going down for it, so it wasn't worth it to me. And that left a little sore spot in my head as far as the Forest Service is concerned, the cheap buggers. So I quit. I don't regret it a damn bit. Oh, I worked for 3 years for logging industries on Slash disposal after that, and that was a lot of fun and good pay.
Was that for KFP?
Yeah.
I guess that would be right up Crawford Creek?
Mostly up in the Lardo country there.
Oh.
Yeah, when you're all over to Lardo, except some over in where Skyway is now. Before Skyway. I don't know, that pretty well covers it all.
Well, when you were growing up in Caslow, did you...
I didn't grow up in Caslow.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were born in Caslow.
I was born there, but that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were living folks were living in Trout Lake back in those days. And that was just about the wind up of that country. Because the old man toughed it out. He had Vern's meat market was in there for years, and they pulled out, sold out to George Johnson. George Johnson sold out to my dad in the butcher business. Well, by 1916, everything was flat up in that country, so we pulled to Creston. Although I say I was born in Caslow, I never lived there.
Had your mom come to Caslow to have you at the hospital?
Yeah, that's right. It was either come to Caslow or go to Revelstoke from Trout Lake. So she chose Caslow.
So she could come down to Gerrard on a boat.
And take the train down to Lardo and take the tug or boat or whatever is available and go to Caslow. And then reverse it going back. Yeah, days of real sport.
I guess by the time that you were born and old enough to remember, the mill at Gerrard was closed, wasn't it? Was the mill running there when you were born?
I think the mill was running there, and also the one at Trout Lake back in those days, but they were closing up. I know the big one at Trout Lake was closed up at that time because things were going flat. There was the metal markets, I guess, went to hell. All the mines closed up. So that was it.
Were you old enough to remember Trout Lake City very much?
Oh, some. I was 8 when we left there. And then we had a lot of old pictures I used to look at. Mm-hmm. And then when I was at Lardo, that was part of my district. So I was in there, once, twice a month for the loggers and so on, firefighting. So, and then the Japs moved in there. When they moved into the Slocan, they went into that country and they were looking for old houses to tear down and rebuild up at Lemon Creek. Mm-hmm. And they pretty near wrecked the town. I remember our old house was gone when I went back in there in 46. The Japs had packed that over to... Of course, it wasn't ours anymore. The old man, he just let her go back to the government when we pulled out. There's no use paying taxes on something you're never going to use and you couldn't sell.
So your dad was the butcher there for a while?
Yeah. Till 16, then we went to Creston. So
did you meet the forest ranger here in Creston and do some firefighting when you were a boy?
No, not till I didn't do any firefighting with Jim till, when was it? About 1930.
Just before you do me. Get out.
Because I had been at Kimberley working, and when the Depression hit, they laid off a few of the young bucks like myself. Had to go and So I backed down to Creston. Took odd jobs, worked the sawmills, went over to the Slocan, worked in the mines. I was busy all the time, always had something to do, and never went on relief because I could always find a job.
What did you do in the mines? Did you work underground?
Yeah, I was underground mucking. You see, at that time, there was a shortage of miners due to the war effort. And the Depression come in there, and that didn't help. So I was mucking there for a few months, learned that, and then they needed a man on the machines. Well, this big Finn there, he'd been teaching me how to run his machine. I was his helper part-time, and when the opening come, well, I took a machine too, so I was a miner. And I mined as a miner there for a few months, and I needed timbermen. Well, that was up my alley. I knew how to timber, so I quit mining and moved up 4 bits a day pay. You see, miners got $4 a day. Timbermen got $4.50 a day. So I got $4.50 a day till the Mammoth closed up. Then I come back to Creston. She hooked me. And then that first year or two of the Forest Service, you only work summertime, you see. You get another job in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. So I went into coal mines at Michel as part-time timberman and mugger. And my paycheck, it was a joke too, because the place we were living at, my paycheck each month was considerably bigger than old Tommy's there. They couldn't figure that out. How a greenhorn would come up there and go into the mine and get more money than him, because he worked in the mines all his life. But he was content to always stay as a mucker. And I went in there on the timberman's pay, which was 4 bits a shift more. Oh, the good old days.
Yeah, we didn't get rich.
But we could buy. Great life. Yeah.
But did you prefer the Forest Service to mining?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What did you like about it?
Well, you're out in the open, your own boss most of the time. And geez, that mining, I wouldn't stick with it anyway, because you didn't know when a rock was going to hit you on the head.
Well, you were always interested in it, weren't you? Even before the minings and all, before you know me.
Oh, yeah, hell,
you had a mill down here.
I had my own tie camp at one time down here in Boswell, you see.
So it was always in it. So, I mean, it was nothing new.
And then after we went broke there, I went up to Canal Flats and I hauled ties there for a year or two. And then I hauled logs for, what's his name at Crow's Nest? Night Lumber Company. All this before I joined the Forest Service, so I had an all-around experience and got in with no problem.
Do you remember Jim McDonald very well?
Quite well.
Yes, we knew him quite well. Yeah.
I fought fire for old Jim here back in the early 30s.
Could you describe him a little bit?
His physical.
What kind of person he was?
We always got along like Jim pretty well. Yeah, he was a friendly cuss.
He would have been one of the first rangers in the area, an early forest ranger.
Well, there was Hushcroft and...
well, no, there was Schupe, wasn't there, before?
No, not here. Schupe
not here.
Oh. Yeah, I think there was one or two before Jim came in here. Yeah. I was trying to think of that one fellow's name, but I can't now. But he died a long time ago before George Hushcroft.
His wife would give you a good story on him. She was a boss in the whole family.
Mrs. McDonald.
B.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was funny, I worked for Jim here in fighting fire. And when we both retired from the Forest Service, we were both holding supervisory jobs of equal pay. This seemed odd. But at that time, getting on in those years, you just about had to have a forestry degree to get any higher than a supervisor position over ranger, to get into the management end of the business.
By the 60s.
Yeah.
Well, this was quite a change. Did you see that coming? The
Oh,
role
we could feel it all the time because we were getting foresters into our offers, and there was quite a division between the operations, which was fires and lookouts and all that, against the management, which handled all the timber sales and cruising.
My point of view, it was just not fair.
But these were educated boys, you see, and we were just common roustabouts.
For my two bits, for all the time that we worked in the Forest Service, not once did we ever have a holiday. Every weekend, when we planned something, there was always had a standby.
The fires.
And I resented that to me as far as I'm concerned.
That's the early days. There was
that
no
was
holidays.
I mean, we didn't get any consideration at all. The wives' part, or the family.
Mm-hmm. Did you raise children in the Forest
No,
Service?
we just were very lucky we didn't have any.
Well, what years were you at Arrowhead?
46.
Just the one season?
I put in 1 year there, and then they moved me to charge of Cranbrook.
That was wonderful years.
Arrowhead was a fairly isolated spot.
Yeah.
Well, it was just, they had the old government
There was nothing there.
building all right.
There.
They'd done some improvement to it for a stopover for assistant rangers going up and down the lake.
Mm-hmm.
But when they decided to make it into a ranger district, put a ranger up there, I got the first job.
Were you the first job?
The first
ranger at Arrowhead, yeah.
There was nothing there but an old jailhouse, and I sure had to clean the darn thing.
Now there used to be quite a big sawmill at Arrowhead in the early days.
There was.
It all burnt out
days,
years
There was
ago.
nothing left.
Yeah.
Could you see the pattern of the old logging there? Could you see where they had been cutting?
Well, there wasn't too much logging, except right along the lake shores, where they could dump it in the lake and boom it up to their mill.
Mm-hmm.
And same with poles. And when I went up there, the big, on the north end of the lake, north end of our lakes, poles were the big business up in there at that time, till you get down to Halfway Creek, where Sid Leary was up in there robbing the country.
And don't forget, you pioneered at Trout Lake, too.
Well, that was part of my Arrowhead district.
How large was the Arrowhead district? Did you go up the Incommaplut?
Yeah.
He had a big one. Today they have 3 guys doing it.
No, they closed her up.
Well, they closed it up, but they used to have 3 after we quit.
Mm-hmm.
That's 3
Well,
guys
there used to be Arrowhead and the Cusp and Edgewood, you see.
Right.
And now I think they've only got one part-time ranger at Cusp.
Yeah,
And the others,
Field
like Salmo and a bunch more of them, they closed them up altogether.
Did you have a fire lookout tower at Arrowhead?
Yeah.
Where was that?
That was right up behind Arrowhead, that big mountain there. Grizzly Mountain, I used to call it, because Charlie Slade, year before I went up there, Charlie Slade was assistant ranger and used to tour that country and serve as that lookout man up there. He was going up one day there with a pack on his back, taking some grub up. And old Charlie, he never made any noise in the bush. He was sneaking up there, and the first thing he knew, an old she-grizzly had him. And she was on the high side of the trail, and the cubs were on the low side. And when they squawked and run, the old girl come down there and put the boots to old Charlie and tore him up a little bit and then left. And Charlie come back down out of that there. He went, lucky he was able to walk. He got back down to Arrowhead and they got him to the hospital and got him sewed up. He carried on for quite a few years after that. That was, I always remember that lookout, where old Charlie's leading his grizzlies.
That's Sprout?
Sprout, yeah.
What was the building like? What kind of lookout did they have on the top there?
Just a regular lookout building, 4 square, and a bunk, and the windows around so you could see everywhere, and a fire finder, they called it in those days, where you could take an angle on a fire.
Was that on?
Yeah.
What kind of tower was it?
No tower up there. Didn't need a tower up there.
Huh. I've never seen a picture of that.
No, I haven't got one either. No.
Who was the lookoutman there?
I had a young fella up there when I was there. A young kid that didn't know beans, but willing to learn, and I can't recall his name for the life of me. But he was there just during the summer holidays from college, and as soon as the college started to open up, he was gone. We let him go. Golly, I can't think of his name.
How did he make out learning all that in one season?
Well, he was lucky up there. He never had a fire. That wasn't, we couldn't see from the ranger station, so no problem.
Was Sproat an old lookout? Had it been there for a long time?
Been there quite a few years, yeah. Serviced from the cusp. That's where Charlie Slade was servicing it when he was up there, and the grizzlies played with him.
Did you ever have trouble with bears?
No, never. I had a little black Airedale for a while, and then I got a one of the Dunkhopper labs. That dog was with me all the time. And many times I know damn well he was off putting a run on a bear or something like that. But he never barked or growled or a damn thing. He was quiet all the time. That's all lucky, you know, man. And I never had any problem with a bear. Never seen one that's handy as long as I had the dog on. But there are lots of them in that country. There were then. Yeah. Yeah. I know the last time was several years since I went into the office there at Nelson. I walked through there and everybody looking around, who's that old bugger? I walked through there and circled around and back out again. I never seen a soul I knew.
Why did they open up the Arrowhead Ranger Station?
Oh, fires. Always a few fires up in that country. And the logs begin to perk up a little bit. Old Sid Leary was expanding, and Pinkston Creek was going on, and they needed somebody up there more steadier than assistant rangers running out of the cusp.
How did you? Oh, sorry.
Same way they opened Edgewood up, put a ranger in there, Bill Haggard, at the same time. So when the cusp was cut up into 3 instead of one big.
How did you get around there? Did you have a boat?
Yeah, I had a couple of boats, a truck.
There wasn't a particularly extensive road.
Well, when I wanted to get a few groceries or something, I always had to run into Revelstoke.
Well, where did you leave your truck?
Well, we could drive into Revelstoke.
Oh, up the, yeah.
And then take the ferry going into Beaton and drive up to Trout Lake in Ferguson. In those days.
It was pioneering days. I enjoyed those years.
That was back in 46.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you hold timber sale auctions in Arrowhead? Were there bidders for timber? And
No. Old Sid Leary was the only logger we had there at that time, and most of his sales were held in Nelson. So when I went up there was only one sale held the whole time I was there. Leary had them all tied up for a few years.
Why would they be in Nelson? Weren't these auctions usually at the ranger office?
Usually, yeah. But this one happened to be one up halfway quick there, and there was, I don't know, I forget all the particulars on it now, but there was some argument there, and Sid Leary wanted it held in Nelson, because I think he had other business in Nelson at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Save him getting on the boat and going up to Arrowhead. Of course, Sid had his own way.
Yeah, you might as well say he was a big shot. You know.
And he was what was he, Minister of
something, yeah.
Minister of Lands or something down there in Victoria at that time too. So whatever he wanted, he got.
Did you have a riverboat for going up the river?
Oh, they were just overgrown. Well, they were river boats, yeah.
Blue Ox, wasn't it?
But
yeah.
we never went up any rivers. The Incoma flow, there was no road up it.
Just up to Beaton and back.
Part way, and you couldn't run a boat up that quick anyway.
Galena.
And the other way, we had the road into Revelstoke, up that way. Well, the other boats, we'd go down to Pinkston Creek or Halfway Creek or something like that with them.
Were they outboards or were they?
Yeah, all outboards.
You know the Amabilis on this lake? The big cabin boat that they had?
These were just open boats.
These were just open?
Just open things,
just
big things, open, heavy.
Open river boats. So.
Yeah, there was no cabin on it.
Summer and winter. Of course, in winter time we put her up and let the snow cover it up.
Yeah.
Did you have a boathouse?
No. Never heard of such a thing
in
in those days.
when we were leaving, they started to build up a nice, fancy, big warehouse and residence and everything else. But by the time that was getting organized, we were moved to Cranbrook.
But you weren't in Cranbrook for too long then, no? Mm-hmm.
We was up there, 3 years? I went up there in spring of 47.
Yeah, I forget which.
They moved me back into Nelson in spring of 50.
Yeah.
Can you describe your job a bit in Nelson? You said that there was a time of expansion for the Forest Service.
It was. That's primarily my job was just building inspector. Mm-hmm. I had 2 or 3 or 4 ranger stations going at a time, and spent most of my time going from one to the other and just saying that things were done properly and the proper material and so on. And then during the fire season, of course, I had to get out and help the ranger on some of the bigger fires. But that was more or less the sideline at that time. For me. Then they got their building done, so they decided, well, now let's put supervisors in the field to work with the rangers, help them out, so on and so forth. So instead of building inspector, they called me supervisor after that, and no increase in pay. But it was a good life. I enjoyed every bit of it. And it was only, we put in, the Forest Service back in those days. That was your life. You didn't figure on holidays or anything else or long hours. You never worked from 8 till 6. You worked as you worked. How many time we were out there 24 hours a day and no time off.
You hope for holidays. The minute you quit, they had all kinds of holidays.
Then by the time I was leaving, began to get organized a little bit and say, look here, let's cut this down. Let's put in the hours as normal. And we'll get our 2 weeks holidays. And the outfit, the boys organized, got all the goodies after I left. So I guess I didn't stay long enough or something. But it was undreamed of that you would take holidays in the summertime. I get a week in the fall, spring. And old George Schupe there, when I worked under him there in Nelson there, he didn't want men to take holidays at all. And part of the problem was his, because he was always hungry. He always wanted to get more work done than the rest of the rangers in the district. Make his name loom up as the most productive ranger in the outfit.
He was the district forester?
No, he's just a ranger in charge of that Nelson district at that time. Yeah. But he was always ambitious. He liked to get all inspections and everything else totaling up more than anybody else. So he used to push old George Gill and I pretty hard there at times.
Well, did you work under him?
Yeah.
In Nelson?
I was back in 1944 or 1945.
When did you go to Fernie?
40, spring of 40. I think it was 39, no, 41. Must have been 41.
So between Fernie and Arrowhead, you were back into Nelson, working as an assistant?
No, I was in Fernie, then to Nelson, then to Arrowhead, from Arrowhead to Cranbrook, from Cranbrook back to Nelson. So I was in Nelson the last 15 odd years. I worked with him.
There were quite a few mills in Nelson in those days.
Well, one big one there.
Which one do you think of as the big one?
One out this side of Fairview there.
Which then was Glacier?
Yeah. Yeah. Geez, that's quite a while.
Was it called Katie and Page then, or just Katie Pole and
Katie alone. I think Katie alone was in on that. That's remember down the lake here a few miles there were some tourist cabins alongside the road, cottages. And Katie and a couple other fellas been up Goat Creek here where they're cutting poles and white pine. They came back down that night and they were too late to get across the lake, so they decided to stay at these cabins. And they looked pretty tough. They went out in the bush for a couple of days, you know, and their old clothes on, and these people in the cabin didn't want to let them in. They were a bunch of tramps. Well, Katie had a good laugh over that a few times. Him and Horton. Horton was in on it part-time, too.
Elmer Horton?
Yeah.
Now, he was an American, wasn't he? Katie?
Yeah. Katie and Horton.
Do you know where they were from?
No.
Well, I'd be interested in stories about forest firefighting or lookout towers, and wonder if you might think of some.
Forest fires in my day where you walked and you used grub hose, crosscut saws. Today you got power saws, you got bulldozers, you got aircraft, you got helicopters, things that we just dreamed of. We could see them coming, but we didn't have them yet. I know we didn't have any helicopters around here till around 1950, I think it was. The first one in Nelson there, and the first plane we could call our own. And on 50, we had two planes, one stationed in Cranbrook. While I was there, at our beck and call when we needed them. And after that, the things began to pick up, began to use bulldozers in the fires instead of hand grubbing, and getting more logging roads in where he had access. I have a story in there written by one of my assistant rangers from Cranbrook of a fire we had way back up in the country here in Redding Creek. And he told the story of was when we were getting our first portable radios. And I was wanting one for Marcusson on that job. And we didn't have it. Oh, they're coming. So there's no communication between headquarters and the crew in the bush. So we were getting radios on our lookout so we could get rid of the old telephone lines at that time too, which was a big improvement.
Did you have a telephone line up from Sproat to Arrowhead?
Yeah, we had a telephone line up there at that time. And about the time I got in there, we were getting the radio up there, so that was a big improvement.
And when you were working in Nelson, what fire towers did you have around? Copper?
Let's see, Copper was the handiest there. That was the only one overlooking the Nelson district. I don't know whether they're still using it or not. They've got some new rigs they put up that can spot these lightning strikes anywhere in the country and tell you exactly where they are. You see, we don't need lookout men anymore.
That's right.
So there's more unemployed.
But was it hard to keep good lookout people on the lookouts?
No. Back in those days, there was always somebody wanting a lookout job. We used to have 2 or 3 applications for everyone we wanted. And we had some good boys up there. And we had some that weren't so good. But of course, that's the run of the mill. Oh, we had them. We'd give them a little schooling before we took them up. Get all the lookout men in and show them how to read all the maps and keep what records, weather records, and so on. How to plot a fire if they did see one. So on. Most of them picked up pretty good. No problem.
This was the lookout school that they ran in the.
Yeah, we had one every spring.
Who actually ran it?
Oh, any of us that were available. I know that Al Larson and I held 2 or 3 of them. And Chase was in on 2 or 3. Bill Haggard, I think, was even in a couple of times too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'd hold one at Nelson, and we'd hold one at Elko. The boys over there. Couldn't send them up on the mountaintop without telling them what to do and how to do it.
What do you think some of the main problems they faced were?
Well, it's lonesomeness, I guess, about as any. Up there sitting day and night and nobody to talk to, and some of them couldn't even afford to take a battery radio up with them. So they didn't have any music or anything else. They got pretty lonesome first. You go up there and they were taming chipmunks and grouse and everything else, just for companions. That was one of the biggest problems of loneliness. And it would be.
What about lightning?
Well, some of them, you walk in, they had all their chairs and everything else on these glass insulators for the telephone lines. And they set these on the chair so there's no direct contact to the ground. Some of them had dugouts dug out down the hill. A piece of a storm's coming over, they'd crawl into it. Remember old Harry on the Fruitvale lookout.
At Beaver?
Yeah, one year there. Storm was coming in, so old Harry got the hell out of there. And she was hit. Not too hard, but enough that his phone line was burnt off, and we ran out a very long piece of cable for ground for the telephone. And that was just, you'd think you'd taken a plow and plowed it out the way that lightning bolt had followed that down, burnt that wire out. Shook the house up a piece.
But it blew all the soil off the top of it?
Yeah. And I don't know of any lookout man ever being hit while I was with them. No problem. They all had a hole to get into or get the hell out of there altogether. Old Harry was the closest one. He got down to Fruitville. Get out of that one.
Oh. Someone was hit on Thompson once. Buster said.
Could have been. I don't recall. Trying to think of old Harry's name. I can't remember now. He's a rather plump, happy-go-lucky fellow. Well liked.
Well, did you work for George Palethorpe?
No, I never worked for George. George was up in Castle country, and then he came in as kind of a supervisor. I forget what he was now when he went into Nelson.
Did the Forest Service build their own buildings, or did they hire contractors?
Oh, they were contracted out. They were all put up to bid. Usually the lowest bidder got it.
Were you also building patrolmen's cabins and boathouses and sorts of things?
Yeah, not many boathouses. Caslow was one big project, but they're contracted out.
Mm-hmm.
Cabins in the bush. We put a gang in there, build a log cabin. Of course, out in Gold Creek, when we built that one out there, we used good lumber on that one. We got a grant to buy the lumber.
Where's Gold Creek?
That's between Cranbrook and Elko.
Oh.
Down in south and east of Cranbrook there. I remember when we built that one out there, that was way back. Even before I went up there, yeah. Because old Bob Cameron, he built that. He scrounged lumber around from the different logging outfits there in the sawmills, and he got these patrolmen. He had Harry Sandberg there with one patrolman was a good carpenter. So they built a pretty nice cabin out there. More like a house than it was a cabin when they got done with it. But in those days, you did a lot of scrounging, you know. You didn't get much money to do anything.
I mean, would you take apart old buildings, or what?
No, really, we could get enough lumber for the purpose. And up the Elk Valley, I remember building that cabin up there at Tobermory. We there's some good logs up in there, so we rustled enough lumber and shingles for a roof and built the rest out of logs. And the next year we got wanted to build a cabin in Connor Lake, and we got a $500 grant for that. Well, the only way to get into Connor Lake is by float plane. So we built that mostly out of logs in the area.
Why did you want the cabin there if it was so inaccessible?
Well, I'll tell you, it's accessible by plane. That was it. And it was a good goat hunting country. I know there was 2 or 3 falls there. Harry Forrest, he was district forester, and Harold Holmberg was in charge of operations, and I was supervising it. We all liked to do a little hunting, so we get together and with Don Thompson, the pilot, he'd fly us into Connor Lake there, and we'd use the cabin for a goat hunt. Well, I liked to hunt goat, and so did Forrest, and Holmberg, he was always after an elk, and we usually got our meat. That was the wind-up of the fire season. So Don Thompson would fly us in and then come and pick us up there a few days later.
So that cabin was a hunting cabin?
Well, that's what it was, all right. But you had to build these things under some pretense.
Harry Forrest, he was a district forester?
Yeah.
Now, was he a trained forester from university?
Yeah. Oh, hell, you didn't get up no job unless you had your ticket.
But you must have had to go to ranger school.
Yeah.
What year did you go?
48.
What was ranger school like?
Well, it was just a repetition of a lot of things we always knew, but then they give us a lot of shortcuts too, and give us more training on, of course, these so-called professors that they had down there. They were experienced foresters and rangers, but they didn't know a hell of a lot more than some of us that have been in the game and fighting fires for quite a few years. And their problem was that they've been fighting what fires they had down the coast. And most of us down in the class I was there were from the interior here, and it's an entirely different situation altogether.
Can you describe that a bit? What you mean by that?
Well, they got a different type of debris down there from a logging operation. They got more on an acre there than we got on 20 acres up here, you see. And when you're building a fire guard, you like it burnt out as much as you can as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
Well, up here, there's no problem. You can burn it out because the slash isn't so heavy that you can't keep it from jumping your guard. But down there, I couldn't see them burning out a hell of a lot of stuff that what you call them said they did do, and I guess they did do if they watched the winds and the weather, hit her at the right time. But it's an entirely different situation. Yeah. But they done a good job, I figured, all the way through teaching the class. We were already, most of us, or half of us, the class, they were already with ranger appointments. The rest were coming along. So they did some good, I guess. Oh, we used to have some great arguments too there on firefighting, setting up camps and so on. But everybody has a little different idea. And these fellows down there that drew up this course for these schools all had a little different ideas. Some of them are good, some of them are it's a difference from some of the rest of us, like Bill Haggart and I when we were there. We had our ideas, they had their ideas. And we had a few words there, but we got together on it and argued it out and split the difference and come to a happy conclusion. No problem. But they were dealing with some of us that had just as much experience that they did in the actual work. Where they come in on a better deal is when it come to forest management and the logging practices. Then we'd have some arguments there because the logging on the coast that they were used to is a lot different than logging here in the interior. A different type of forest altogether. Different ground, density, even weather. But they were worthwhile. We all got our little certificate saying we'd successfully passed. So.
What were some of the practices in those days that you used for management? For what kinds of harvesting practices did you use?
Well, we didn't do any harvesting.
But you would have in setting up the timber sales, was there a lot of clear cutting in the 40s, or was it mostly diameter limit?
Mostly diameter limits in my experience, no. Some places was clear cut, you get into an old growth where it all should be taken out and replanted. And that was the theory, but damn little replanting was done in my time. But we found that natural regeneration was good in this country. And our biggest problem was to get the loggers to burn up, clean up their slash afterwards, prepare the ground.
Why was that a problem? They didn't want to do it?
They didn't want to do it because it cost money. I figured they were paying stumpage for what they got, and that should cover any improvements. We used to have some arguments there. And they got away with it more of the times than we did because they take it up with, in my time. That's a different situation today. The rangers probably got a little more authority out there, but we didn't have any. They'd go to old Leary, the minister at Victoria, and they'd say, "Oh, well, these boys are having it pretty hard. Better let them off this time." I know Al Farstad, he pulled one fast from there on me in Cranbrook. Doing it that way.
Did you shut someone down?
Oh, I chased Barn Kennelly clean out of the bush there one time in Gold Creek. Because they went in there and on a nice stand of what we call second growth coming up. You know, anywhere up to 10, 12 inches and nice and tall. And they had a timber sail in behind, and they were supposed to follow an old creek bed up at the road. But they didn't. They headed right across country from Teepee Creek. And they just murdered everything, went in and built a big mill site in there, all this young timber thing. Just mowed it all down. And it was a total waste, total loss. And there was no reason for it. So we had quite a get together there, but I didn't get any backing. I wanted to trespass and keep them out of the bush. But Victoria office, oh, let her go with the war effort. This was in 1949. Still suffering from the war effort to take off. You see, everything got to go towards helping out the war effort. Like Colin Cameron up there, he never had any trouble with old Colin, but and an example of the war effort, he was shipping lumber that would go into the burner in ordinary times, but he was selling it. War effort, he says. They'd take anything.
Colin Cameron, where did he operate?
Wassa. Yeah, he never liked Forest Service. He used to work for the Forest Service. Then was a job come up, and I forget what it was now. But there was two of them involved, and the other fellow was chosen for the job, and Cameron quit. And he didn't like Forest Service after that. But him and I got along pretty good. Because I went out there one time, he wanted a piece of timber, and I didn't have time to go out and cruise it. Now, for when he wanted it. If we waited till fall, I could have done it, but... So I told him, hell, between you and I, Colin, I says, get me an estimate there. Bring it in. So he did. So I made up the cruise report, the volumes he named, recommended direct sale. He got it. Oh, he's a happy boy after that, and him and I got along 100%. Just on a matter of about 500,000 feet of log. Small sale. That's the way it was done in those days.
You could award it directly rather than bidding.
That's my recommendation, you see.
Was that common?
Oh, yeah. I had to recommend on all sales, whether auction or direct sale. All these smaller ones, where it's practical, we always recommend direct sales.
And how would the price be set then?
I'd set the price. You based the selling price against the logging costs. That's what it wasn't. Their margin to the operator, the logger, mill, whoever's taking it, and a fair stumpage rate for the horse.
When would you, and under what circumstances would you direct award?
Well, if it's the applicant is the one that's handiest to it, might be a little chunk of timber off in the corner that he's the only one that could get at it, stuff like that. Off like Colin Cameron, this one piece out there, there's only 500,000 feet of logs involved. It was in his piece of territory, so-called. And what's Cranbrook now and Barn Kennelly and those, they didn't want to bother with any way out. That was 25, 30 miles from their operations. Back in those days, that was long hauls.
Times change.
They sure have.